Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back or welcome to my podcast, Rewire to Inspire. I am your host, Jessie Brown, and I am very excited to be jumping on the microphone with you all for episode number 187. If you're watching video, you will definitely be able to notice a difference. I am not home when I'm recording today's episode. I am at my partner's house, and he just got done having surgery, so I'm trying to be quiet because he's sleeping downstairs. So I have Bailey, my dog, behind me in the background, and I am trying my best to get these episodes recorded and uploaded. But if you notice any difference in the sound or location or even just the echoiness of the microphone, which I hope that you don't, but if you do, that is what's going on. So I hope that you guys can bear with me for today's episode. I am hoping to record Thursday's episode in my regular office so that I will have the same setup as usual. I am here with my flashlight on my phone shining on me for a little bit of light because I do not have my ring light. But that is life. We adapt, we pivot, we find ways to persevere through. And I am just very, very excited and honored to be jumping on here for today's episode. If you missed my last episode, number 186, I shared with you guys a story all about a time that I lasted one day at a job, and the importance of listening to your intuition, listening to your heart, not being afraid to do what's best for you. And I think that episode really beautifully kind of complements today's episode. And today we're going to talk about 10 things to stop feeling guilty about or for. Guilt is a word that is going to resonate with all of us differently. It plays a role in each of our lives uniquely. Some of us feel guilty for doing things that are just basic human needs, and we just feel that guilt that we carry upon us. A lot of guilt comes from conditioning from our childhood of either being guilt-tripped into doing something, not feeling like your needs matter. Maybe you've had a partner that's made you feel like that, life circumstances. Whatever it is, we all have a different relationship with guilt. And so I encourage you to just take a moment and ask yourself, am I someone who typically feels guilty for doing what's best for me? Am I someone who typically feels guilty for honoring my emotions and sticking to things that I know are best for me? And if the answer to that is true, I hope you stick with me today as we go through these 10 things to stop feeling guilty for. Because far too often, we forget to give ourselves the capacity and the permission to give ourselves what we need. We're so quick to jump to, I'm not worthy, I'm not, deserving of whatever it is. And so often I hear people say, I feel guilty for that, I feel guilty for this. I think it's time that we reframe our relationship with feeling guilty, because putting yourself first is not selfish. Putting yourself first is not something to feel guilty about. It is the only way that we can work towards optimizing our mental health and having a healthier, better relationship with ourselves. So without further ado, let's jump into these 10 things to stop feeling guilty about. The first thing that I wrote down is don't feel guilty for taking a break. This whole episode in and of itself came about because of this first point. So this last weekend, my partner and I were coaching our basketball team locally, and we decided, let's get a hotel and stay the night and just have some time away. And as much as I was really, really excited and looking forward to this, there was such a part of me that felt guilty for taking time away. As someone who is undoing conditioning of feeling like I need to be working 24/7, it takes me a little bit longer to lower that guilt and to validate for myself that I don't have to feel guilty for taking a break. I don't have to feel guilty for doing things that are fun, doing things that I enjoy. But because I've been telling myself a story for so long that is wasted time, you're not worthy of that, whatever, I've built this belief that taking a break is something that I should feel bad about. And so if that is you, if you are someone who feels like anytime you take a break, there's a part of your subconscious that chimes in and makes you feel guilty, I encourage you to start to challenge that. And like with any of these, I don't have the answer. These are just some of the most common things that I think we need to stop feeling guilty for, because they are just basic human needs that we all need to be able to thrive and be the best version of ourselves. Because whether I liked it or not, I did, but in taking time away is actually more beneficial than continuing to push through resistance and to push through burnout. We are more creative when we step away from our work than when we keep trying to push through when we're feeling blocked, burnt out, and overwhelmed. And so stop feeling guilty for taking a break and taking time for you, because you deserve it. And if anything, it's actually going to make you more optimal at whatever it is you're doing. Now, just like all of these, there is a spectrum. We have to make sure we're not over swinging the pendulum and then just taking breaks all the time and losing momentum and not sticking to our goals and to our promises. But it's okay to take some time and to take capacity to take a break from what it is that you're doing. Number 2, don't feel guilty for being really good at something and learning to accept a compliment. Last week, we had our final meeting for the year with the Youth Mental Health Summit Committee. That was the first meeting that we had since the actual event, and I was getting a lot of feedback about my keynote speech. As someone who has a really, really hard time taking a compliment, I had to learn in that moment to stop feeling guilty and to take the compliment. If you can hear little ticks walking around, that is my dog Bailey, and I'm hoping that she lays down here, but there's lots of new smells going on. But feeling guilty for being good at something really serves no purpose. All it's doing is discrediting your uniqueness, your talents, your gifts, your abilities, and it's really serving no purpose other than tearing you down. And so I definitely encourage you to notice the next time you feel guilty for being good at something. If somebody compliments you on something, or if it's you yourself being your own critique of telling yourself that you shouldn't be able to tell yourself kind things, that if you're really good at something, you downplay yourself, you talk yourself down, you talk yourself out of it. We need to stop feeling guilty and instead lean into celebrating the things that we're good at and celebrating accepting compliments of knowing that people see the good in us, and it's far too often that we do not see that for ourselves. So that is the second thing to stop feeling guilty about. Okay, back to business. I'm hoping that she lays down. She's got the clickiest little feet. I gotta trim her toenails. Like I said, we're working through this. We're pushing through this. All is good. Number 3, don't feel guilty for saying no and having boundaries. The whole point of having boundaries is to self-protect, is for your mental health, is for self-love. And if we feel guilty for having boundaries, we're really doing the opposite of the benefit of having boundaries, because we still end up feeling like crap in our own mind because we said something, implemented something, stopped doing something for the betterness of ourselves. And we sit there and we feel guilty and we beat ourselves up. And it's like almost a double-edged sword, because not only do we have this boundary for a reason, but now we're feeling guilty for having it. And I get that that guilt comes in and that shame comes in, especially if we've been conditioned to feel like asking for what we want isn't necessarily, what's the word I'm trying to think of, isn't necessarily always validated or accepted. But it's time we stop feeling guilty for saying no to things. If you don't want to do something, if something's not in alignment, if you just genuinely have different feelings or emotions towards something than even you used to, it's okay to say no and to have boundaries. And those that accept you for that will not perpetuate that feeling of feeling guilty and will accept you for that. And it is more that we surround ourselves with those people that accept us for having those boundaries and encourage us to have boundaries, that our relationship with guilt can also begin to improve. Because again, that was often wired within you because somebody has made you feel guilty before, or we've continued to trick ourselves for a long extended period of time that we are supposed to feel guilty for doing these things that are best for us. So I know that I'm working on this one. Saying no is something I still really, really struggle with. I know that I'm a recovering people pleaser. I know still in a lot of ways I will push myself aside to make sure that I'm tending to other people, because if I don't, I feel guilty and I need to work on that for myself. So I am by no means saying I'm an expert at any of these. I think it's about picking the one that causes you the most pain and frustration and sadness, beginning there and starting there. Okay, number 4, don't feel guilty for standing up for yourself. This kind of goes in tandem with that last one, but if every time you stand up for yourself, you feel guilty for it, I want you to celebrate the fact that you did stand up for yourself. But I encourage you to challenge the thoughts of why you then feel guilty. Do you feel guilty because putting yourself first was not always accepted? Do you feel guilty because you're afraid you hurt somebody else's feelings? Do you feel guilty because you're afraid you maybe broke a relationship or you broke rapport? Asking ourselves the why beneath our emotions and our thoughts is huge because it allows us to be detectives to learn why you're feeling that emotion in the first place. When I feel guilt, I have to ask myself, why do I feel guilt? Well, what's the why beneath that? What's the why beneath that? When's the first time I experienced that? Is this a normal reaction based off of something that's really hard? So if standing up for yourself is something that causes you to feel guilty, that's definitely a large indicator that either you doubt yourself, you don't love yourself as much as, we can work on and we can improve. You have past pain and trauma around standing up for yourself. So I definitely encourage you to explore what it is that comes up for you when you're advocating and when you're standing up for yourself. I know that beneath my pain is I feel like I'm a burden. If I stand up for myself, I feel like I'm being a burden to somebody else. And so I need to challenge that and say, what if it is okay for me to be first? What if it is okay for me to stand up for myself, knowing that if I don't stand up for myself, who the heck is going to? Very similar again, number 5, don't feel guilty for choosing what's best for you. Here's the thing. Nobody knows what's best for you like you do. In my last episode, talking about that job that I lasted one day, somebody else could have came in for that exact same position and had a completely different response. I had to do what was best for me in that moment, which was to step away. I recognized a part of me was not in alignment with following through with that position and with going in that job at the time. And so maybe nobody else understood why I was feeling the way I was feeling, but it didn't mean that it wasn't what was best for me. And in actuality, it was 100% what was best for me. And it took me a long time to work on my guilt for that because I felt like, well, what about my clients? What about the people I was going to be working with? What about the people that I was serving? They're struggling more than I am. And then we have all these rationales and reasonings that we give ourselves of why we shouldn't do something. We justify our behavior at the expense of our own well-being. We need to stop feeling guilty for choosing and deciding to do what's best for us, because pretty much 10 times out of 10, we will begin to be resentful and regretful of our decisions eventually if we do not just do it right off the get-go. So as soon as you get those intuitive feelings like something you're doing isn't actually serving you or what's best for you, it's likely an indicator that it's time to step away from said thing. Don't feel guilty for having self-belief. When I first started my podcasting business journey, I had a ton of self-belief. I didn't realize it at the time, but I really wouldn't have taken action without that self-belief. And I had a lot of people that doubted me and made me feel really, really guilty for having that belief. Well, how are you doing it all? Well, how are you fitting it all in? How blah, 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 da, 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 da. And I started to feel so guilty for having this belief in myself that I could accomplish something, because those around me didn't have belief in themselves, and so they started to project that onto me. And then I started to feel guilty for doing the things that I loved. And if that is you, and if you have ever pitched an idea to someone or told someone an idea and they've shot it down, I want you to stop feeling guilty of them projecting what their beliefs are onto you. If you believe in something for yourself and you're excited to persevere something and try something, do not for a second feel guilty for that. It is too often that we back down from persevering and trying to do things that we have interest and curiosity in because we allow others to make us feel guilty for that. Or we guilt ourselves for having self-belief or for being excited to do something. So much of this, again, is conditioning, and we have to re-challenge and rewire those thoughts because they will control you and they will hold you back until you do the necessary actions to challenge them and to take action to make a different reality for yourself. Number 7, don't feel guilty for not responding immediately. This is probably not a fantastic thing, but I have a decent amount of messages right now that I need to get back to. I can struggle to get back to people in a timely manner. A, because I get overwhelmed. B, because sometimes I don't know what to say and I kind of freeze up. But C, because I don't necessarily owe anybody an immediate response. And I used to be at the beck and call of anybody who would call me, who would text me, who would email me. And again, work is different. That is obviously a priority. But I kind of stopped feeling guilty for not responding right away. Now, am I a little on the further end of the spectrum where I need to get better at optimizing responding to messages, especially as a business owner? 100%. I know that a lot of that is anxiety and overwhelm and just too much going on in my life. But so many of us feel guilty if we don't answer every one of our friends' phone calls when they're having a crisis, or, pick up the phone every time our parents need something, or whatever it is. We have to stop feeling guilty for feeling like we are on everybody else's time and like we owe people something. Yes, there is a proper line. If it's for your job, if it's for something, yes, you need to be responsible and be responsive to those things. But when it's starting to be at the expense of your mental health and you're starting to feel guilty for that, that is not a healthy headspace to be in, and something that I think a lot of us struggle with because we're on our phones. We feel like we see those things, we see those triggers, and we're so quick to feed into them. Don't have that expectation going outwards so others don't have that coming at you. If you're someone who answers messages right away and then you have that expectation on others, that is also not realistic. People are busy. People maybe aren't glued to their phones, or maybe you're not their number one priority. That is okay. We need to normalize that we don't need to answer right away. I started to put a 24-hour messaging thing on my business page because it was taking me a couple hours to get back to people and I was feeling guilty. So this is like my buffer, my protector to support me so I can navigate getting back to people in a more timely manner. Okay, 3 more left. Don't feel guilty for pain caused by others. This one has a whole can of worms and depth of healing in and of itself. This one came up as I was thinking of past clients, and they would be sitting there sharing their stories with me of the most horrendous things that people did to them. But they were walking around feeling the guilt for that. I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have drank. I shouldn't have went out. I shouldn't have been wearing that. I shouldn't have. Your pain, you do not need to justify or cover by shaming yourself of why those incidences happened. Again, this one is a whole can of worms in and of itself, so I'm going to keep this very brief and very top level. But if you are feeling guilty because of pain that others posed onto you, my love, I encourage you to seek some mental health support and work on that, because you are deserving of breaking free from that burden that you are carrying on your shoulders and in your heart. It is very hard to get to a healing place when we feel and carry the guilt for pain that isn't ours to carry. Forgiveness is one of the most important, healthiest things when it comes to healing. But I truly believe it begins with ending the feeling of guilt on yourself. If you would have known better, you would have done better. That's okay. That's nothing to feel shameful for. It's about, how do I pivot from here and do the necessary work so you can heal from whatever it is that you went through. Okay, 2 more left. Oh, that's a heavy one. Number 9, don't feel guilty for leaving friendships and relationships. Oh my God, we feel so guilty for leaving friendships and relationships behind, especially the ones that are the most toxic. And I think that we feel more guilty leaving those ones because those people are really loud to let us know that we should feel guilty for leaving them. They give us all the reasons why we should stay, gaslight us into thinking we're crazy. Whatever it is, if you're leaving a friendship, a relationship of any sorts, because it's not serving you and it's not benefiting your life and it's depleting your mental health and it's just not aligned, there's no need to feel guilty. And likely beneath guilty is that you care. There's some part of you that cares and is holding on to something. So again, asking yourself, why do I feel guilty? Do you have a fear of letting people down again? Do you have a fear of losing people? Do you have a fear of confrontation? Do you have a fear of judgment? Do you have a fear of people being angry at you? What is the fear beneath the guilt? Because leaving toxic relationships and friendships, although not easy, is not something you should ever feel guilty for. And again, easier said than done. I remember getting out of my last relationship and I felt so guilty all the time. And it's like, wait a minute. Why do I feel guilty for doing what's best for me and for listening to my heart and listening to my intuition? Why do I feel guilty about that? And beneath it was just the pain and fear of hurting someone. Because even if something's not right for me, the same as leaving that job, it didn't mean that I didn't feel a little bit guilty. But I started to challenge that and notice what the guilt was trying to communicate. And last but not least, number 10, don't feel guilty for changing and growing. This is the one that is most near and dear to my heart. The amount of people that I've had tell me, you've changed, you've grown, you don't even look the same, you don't act the same, you whatever comparison to me in the past. For so long, I felt guilty about that change. People wanted the old me, the fun me, the go out me, the party me, the let loose me, without recognizing that that version of me was depressed, was lost, was confused, was stressed, was depressed, if I didn't already say that. That version of me is not the version of me that I want to be ever again. There's a reason that I healed and I grew from that. But people will make you feel guilty if you've outgrown them. If you've done the work and you've allowed the gap between you and them to become bigger. Because then there's a mirror to them of what they could be if they put in the work. That's why they say growing apart from people. That's also a normal part of life. But when we feel guilty for doing the hard work and for showing up for ourselves, even though it means leaving people behind, it's not something to feel guilty for. It's something to celebrate, because that's the harder path to choose. Choosing in advance to do the things to improve your life, to optimize your life, is one of the best gifts that you can give yourself. And it's okay to take time to process and again, ask yourself why you feel guilty. Maybe you're mourning the loss of certain people, old times in your life, old memories, whatever. But honor and validate why it is you're doing what you're doing. Just like with every single one of these, it comes down to asking yourself why you feel guilty, why you feel shameful, what is the why beneath the emotion, and just loving on yourself through that. We often feel guilty because, again, we care, or we wouldn't be feeling that way. We wouldn't second guess our behavior. It's an indicator of something deeper poking at us, an anxiety of something that is familiar to us in some way, shape, or form. Guilt is there communicating to us, just like anger, just like resentment, just like shame. Be friends with it, lean into it, and ask it what it's trying to communicate to you. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for bearing with me. Bailey behind me appreciates you listening to her little feet pitter-patter around. She has been sleeping for the last little while behind me. So nonetheless, it's a little bit different today, but I am so excited to be jumping on with you all, to have chatted with you all. I hope you're all having a great, amazing Tuesday, and I'm so excited to chat with you all on Thursday. Bye, you guys.